Welcome to Two Arabs and a Podcast, a show with no limits, dating, business, martial arts, self-defense, and the life of two Arabs in America. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your hosts, the owner of Warrior Academy, the son of an immigrant, international traveler, black rank in Krav Maga, a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and Brazil's national champion. And of course, 2018 Self-Defense Instructor of the Year, a bodyguard and military combative instructors, none other than Fraz Azam. Joined by his co-host, Omar Oswan, the owner of Warrior Tactical Training, published author, doctor of criminology, world traveler, fluent in 4 languages, a military combat contractor, and a first-generation immigrant. The show begins now.
Welcome to Two Arabs and a Podcast. We're back after a short period of time and a little break. Falas, how's it going, man?
Good, man. How you doing? You're well?
Good.
I want to apologize quick to our crowd. We've been away for a minute. I've went through a lot of personal things. I went in an accident. Omar, of course, had his shoulder. I think he's jinxing me. He had a torn... what happened to your shoulder?
He dislocated it and tore the muscle.
It was in training, and it was the dumbest thing I ever seen in my life because it wasn't even... He turned and it popped. I never seen that in my life. Of teaching, I was like, how did you do that? So I got in a wreck. My father passed away, so there's been a lot of things go. But that being said, with all the negative things that happened, today we are honored to have the man, the one and only, Dan the Beast Severn. And we're very honored to have him on our show. Dan today came into Kansas City yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Late last night.
Late last night. I got a totally phone call, and I was snoozing like an old man. But Dan came in and rocked a seminar today. Of course, Omar had the pleasure to train since he's healthy now, and I'm not. I'm just sitting there watching. And Dan, welcome, and this is an honor for us. Thank you so much for being here.
Omar, I hope you like the different types of concepts and techniques, because I actually want athletes to become more and more independent, take a little bit more control of their own careers, because if you always sit around and wait, a coach can only get to so many different athletes, but then the coach also has his own job and stuff like that to take care of. So it's hard to understand every individual athlete's, their pros, their cons to them. I mean, as is, if you actually saw some of the notes I have in my database upon each individual athlete, I put down lots of notes. Are they married? Are they single? Are they single with a child? Are they this, that? I mean, because all of these things play a factor.
Of course.
And how much they could concentrate on training.
I mean, today we have an amazing mix, the academy where we have some guys that just do self-defense. We have people like Jen Case, my good friend, she was there, she was, and the funny part, you're going to talk to her, Jen Case, she was there. She's a multi-time world champion black belt in jiu-jitsu and a black belt in judo. She's very successful, but she, in 2006, she was one of the first ladies that won an MMA fight. You were commentating on her fight, believe it or not.
Wow, see that, and I don't even remember that, but again, life has been kind of a blur. But
yeah, she was like so excited. She's one of my good friends, and I consider her a mentor to me too, and other things, how we train with each other. But it just for me to tell, she told me, she was like, I don't think he knows me. He was a commentator on my first MMA fights. And
again, what I was watching was watching the way that the ladies were doing, working on some techniques, and again, everyone has a little bit different type of athletic build to where they're going to do just a little slight different little twist with things. And she likes some of the techniques that go, oh yeah,
she's evil. Jen, you're going to be happy about this one. You're evil. I love her. She's a great, but yeah, she was so excited today.
You kind of do it like this.
Dr. Evil.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share this with our crowd. Of course, we have a crowd multi-mix. Our crowd is basically, this podcast called Two Arabs and Podcast, and we talk political and how to be a man. I mean, we're fans of Dan and Don, toxic masculinity.
Two guys that still relate to being men. Okay.
So we are kind of the other culture version of it. Let me put it that way. But a lot of our guests, our fans around here, when they watch us, a lot of them, some of them are fans, some of them never been fans of the fight game. We bring a lot of different people. So I want to tell my crowd, and I told Omar, and I will say this to you, I remember when coming in to just knowing that me and you've been talking, and I was like so excited. And I tell my students, and they just cannot figure, especially the young ones, I was like, I was 14 years old living in the Middle East. Now let me explain this to you. And knowing about Dan Severn, the pro wrestler first. You know, so we used to, the pro wrestler. That's I'm a pro wrestling fan before it became MMA because your generation is what brought MMA. To be honest with you, I mean, let's say MMA to the broader world. It was there.
Well,
but
I'd say it started from that 1992 period where it went from, actually, December 1993 was the very first UFC #1, but it's so close to 94, I always say from 94 on. My first profession was professional as of 1992. 1994, I jumped to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, but it was known as NHB, which stood for No Holds Barred, and to educate the people who watch it today. The product that you watch today with known as MMA, mixed martial arts, that has approximately 47 to 49 rules. But back then, it had 2 rules: no biting, no eye gouging. Into the rules, no weight classes, and that's where you had the biggest weight difference. You had just over 400 pounds when you had, Keith Hackney going up against Manny Yarborough, the sumo. There was a 400-pound weight difference. And no time that they wanted ultimate victory. They wanted to see that someone that was either going to be unconscious, whether that was being choked out or knocked out. Your corner could actually throw the towel in if they felt that you were not reacting in a rational manner. They could throw the towel in. Other than that, I think they did not even have doctor stoppage, no referee stoppage at that point. And that was like the first 2 or 3 UFCs. And then when they brought Big John McCarthy on, Big John said, he goes, I'm right there watching it. He goes, I have to have the ability to stop the matches, and that was probably one of the very first rules I got in, was that stoppages of matches. So again, little history for the fans that watch it, because most people, they see the current product, MMA. Yes, it's a very aggressive, it's a very shocking type value, but when you look at that MMA and you look at the NHB, if you saw them side by side each other, you're like, oh, this NHB stuff, what a wild, wild west shootout this
Absolutely.
Was. And I noticed you were, sorry to cut you off, I noticed you were having multiple matches in the same day because you were showing up more sweaty throughout the day. So you were having multiple matches.
That became a trademark. It's a sweaty gray shirt.
Well, there's a good story there. But yeah, again, to fans, these were not just individual bouts. Like today, it has grown into just individual bouts on a bout card. Whereas back then, the NHB, there was an 8-man tournament because the ladies were not competing at that point. It was an 8-man tournament. You had to fight 3 times in the same 2-hour pay-per-view that still prevails today, where you just do 1 match on a card. And the product has streamlined. Match could be done quite quickly. The average match during the NHB time frame was 2 minutes and 22 seconds. A very violent 2 minutes and 22 seconds, but they have a 2-hour pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So if these matches go too quickly, they had no backup footage of you traded earlier, or here's some questions that were asked you about from a previous interview about your post, stuff like that. Today's UFC product, they're a well-oiled machine. They have all kinds of stuff in the can. So if a match goes short, they could go into interview after interview, show all kinds of highlights and things of that nature.
Those options were not available at that time.
Right.
See, to me, when I'll tell everybody the story, and today I shared it with my students, and it's funny looking at my students' faces, listening to this, they got a little bit, I think, confused by that. So, I was 14 years old, and I'm not saying this to get a dig at Dan's age. All respect right here. He made a comment about it.
Well, now.
And I do not. But I would never forget the day. My friends called me. Dig this story. So they were like, hey man, do you know that Dan Severn? I was like, yeah, what about Dan? I'm thinking NWA, nothing related to this. So I was just a judo / Muay Thai guy. Just think about that concept. Nothing related to anything. I mean, even, but just never combined this stuff.
Okay.
It was so separate if you think about it. And they're like, yeah, man, that training you do. And I was like, what is that training I do? I was like, what are you guys talking about? Because we're talking about Dan Severn, I'm thinking, okay, well, who's he? What match we got? Man, he's going for this thing. It's called Ultimate Fighting. I'm like, okay, what is that? He's going to fight people in some cage. And I'm like, and it's a tournament. And so, think about it. We live down there. So we get shit 24 hours late.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Because we get it on VHS. Even when we live on the bases, you know how it is, the life there. So I get my American military friends to tell me about it. It's like, yeah, man. I was
You
like,
mean you guys didn't have the black box? Most people had the black box, so they're like, Dad, sorry about that. We cut it to payday. I go, dude, I wasn't getting any of that money from the black box. You can take black boxes all day long. I could care less.
So I was like thinking, it's 2 a.m. Finally the VHS arrives of that phone, and I'm sitting here, have no clue what am I gonna watch. So I see you coming, and I got confused. I'm like, what's going on here? This is my introduction to NHB, Ultimate Fighting, MMA. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ. Dan is fighting. I'm like, Dan is fighting. You know what I'm saying? You know, pro wrestling at that time still had, we don't know what pro wrestling is.
Well, if you could ask me a few questions.
I know. But
Professional wrestling has always had a predetermined outcome.
yes.
Now,
But I'm talking about my time as a 14 years old.
oh no, again, because people were so good at their craft
Yes.
that most people did not know. What starts making it look a little more hokey pokey is when I grab you with my 2 fingers, grab you by the wrist, and all of a sudden I throw you across the room with 2 fingers on your wrist, and you
But you never
magically
did that,
bounce
though.
off. Well, again, I wouldn't do nothing like
That's
that.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You were like different.
I tried to stay true
Yes.
to an actual amateur wrestler
and
and a combative
that
background.
what had me as a fan. Is to be
Oh,
honest. See,
okay.
that's what I'm saying. That's why when I was a fan, I was like, I used to tell these guys, you know, they were talking about the Hulkster and all that. I was like, I used to be a Dan Severn guy because I'm like, I don't see him doing any of this shit. And you know, I don't see the hulking up or because it got corny in a time till the Attitude Era, which we will talk about later. Till you arrived in the Attitude Era, and kind of got a little bit serious down there a little bit.
Well,
But so I watched that tape, and I'm sitting here in shock, watching, and it was a conflicted emotion. Like, holy cow, this is the best shit I ever seen. But I was like, my God, Dan Severn is a beast. So that was my fan moment, and I'm sitting with a bunch of us. You should see us. There were some military guys here, us kids, 2 a.m. in the morning, 14 years old, watching this on VHS. And I know to the fans, I don't think they know what VHS is.
no.
We're gonna put a wiki link.
but NHB, UFC, all of this stuff has influenced so many first responders. It has affected military. It has affected law enforcement, corrections, because they realize matches can be conducted on their feet, but they also can be conducted down on the ground. And so, since that time, I've been introduced to a lot of different instructors that they're like, do you think you could help us? I've been brought in as a subject expert in different things, but I would simply say, well, yeah, it's easy to move if you're wearing just a pair of shorts and t-shirts. Put me in your gear. Put me in a military outfit with the boots. Put me the rucksack on my back. Put the weapon on me. Put me in the actual equipment that you would normally have in. Now let me see how I can actually move and I can make adjustments. And they're blown away how quickly I can show them, even if the way that the weapon is strapped in place, how to use this weapon in ways that they had never thought before. But it's kind of like what I did in even today's seminar. Yes. I want to simply, it's like I'm John. I always relate to I'm John the Appleseed. I'm just planting some seeds so that people they'll start to change the way that they're thinking. But what it opens up is go, well, if Dan can make different things work like this, why can't I? And that's all I want you to do is, yes, you can. Question things, because we live, and I can use that even in the political realm. You better start questioning things a whole lot more.
And I told Firas in the first part of the seminar, and I told him that. I made a comment. I said, usually coaches show up in seminars. We attended many seminars. Yeah. And usually the average coach and the average guy throwing a seminar is, this is my way, this is the highway, you're going to listen to me, don't question shit, this is exactly what we're going to do. And I said, I like your style because you're basically saying, this is why we're doing it. I'm going to explain the logic behind it, and you should question it to improve it yourself.
I'm also going to take it one step. I don't mean to cut you off, but here's what he said. He's being nice.
I'm throwing that part out.
I'm not going to name the name of the person, but flat out he said this, and I said, this man is a legit bona fide world champ in everything he touched. You know?
Thank you.
And this is his word. Yeah. If I'm wrong,
right.
stop me. But he said, I brought a lot of people. There's amazing instructors we brought. Every now and then, the self-defense realm is quirky because you know how they are. They never fought. So, like we talked about that. But they come in, they think, this is me, I am the burning bush. Yeah, thank you. But he said, and even Rolf came to me, which one of my students for 12 years, and came to me, and all of them said, they're like, this is the man, this is the beast. And he said in front of us, and he said, here's what it looks like, but here's the other avenues, and what shape, what sizes, what that. You are literally, and this is off subject, and I don't want to say, but what you brought today is really, to me, most, as a teacher, as a martial arts teacher, as a self-defense instructor as well, and I'm passionate about fighting and all that, the fact that you can sit and break it down the way you break it, put the time, is just mind-blowing everybody, because you take a lot of time and pride in what you teach, but you don't sit, this is the Dan Severn way.
Yeah.
You and that's rare. That's what caught your attention. And you literally said, from how old is Rex? Not even.
Yeah, like 5, 6.
I mean, we got all the young ages came into the adults, and they're saying, literally, you went one by one, and made it to the point that the technique works for them.
Yes.
And
Quick tweaks, because we're not all created equally. Some are tall, some are short, some are thick, some are thin, some have
no
bigger
necks,
some have no necks. I mean, but that being involved in the sport of amateur wrestling. My first love, amateur wrestling. Mm-hmm. I've had lots of coaches. Most of these coaches were usually, when they were in their competition days, they would have been that 125 pounder up to about probably 165 pounder at the heaviest, and they're trying to. They're like trying to turn everyone else into a mini me.
Yes.
Or they're trying to show this heavyweight, who is 6'8" and weighs 325 pounds, how to do a high crotch farmer's carry. Heavyweights are not built like that. They have to do something totally different. And I look at it even at lighter weight classes. 150 pounds can come packaged all different way. It could be tall, like a rail, and short and thin, like a little, or short and pudgy, like a little fire hydrant. Everything falls somewhere in between. So I'm always trying to teach to the body type, who's got longer arms, shorter arms. But I'm really big about that. But I do want to question things, because one size fits all is not going to work.
Yeah. At that time, I mean, this is a big thing. I mean, when I used to compete, I was 155er. Now I'm not, so nobody gets on my case. Me and Dan were joking about the scale. I touched the scale and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. So the scale makes or breaks most people.
Oh man, when you said that, I laughed. I mean, I grew up on judo because the weight cut was terrible. Wrestling is the worst weight cut out of all. And when I did jiu-jitsu weight cut, it wasn't as bad. Luckily, I got a good coach, Ethan Minden. He helps me with that. But wrestling was my disaster. When I hear weight cut, I'm like, ugh. Like even my MMA, when we deal with MMA fighters, I hear weight cut. I ain't judging.
Just to hold you right there. In high school, I played football, and I weighed right around 2 1/4. But when I wrestled at 185. So even in high school, by my junior,
what was your height?
I was still right about that, just 6'1" to 6'2" range. I'd say I stayed that range until more recently. As I get older, now I'm starting to shrink. So I'm basically 6'1", maybe at best.
Yeah,
with a good shoe day.
Yeah.
So going back to your days, you started. So did you start with wrestling, or did you start with football? How did you make that transition?
Again, just being a kid growing up. I liked being involved in athletics altogether. I mean, I played baseball. I did soccer. Physical education used to be actually physical education in our school system.
Yes.
They don't do that nowadays. But like into high school, there was I played three sports a year. There was football, there was wrestling, and there was track and field. Mm-hmm. I loved football more than I did wrestling. Mm-hmm. The hard part of when I eventually put all my eggs in one basket, I played football all 4 years. I had actually a number of football scholarships to go on to college to play football. The head football coach at Arizona State, he used to come and watch me at some of the whole dual meets for wrestling. He's like, Severn, you're an animal. I see linebacker written all over. I go, Coach, you got me pegged. I go, I'd rip my heart out and I'd give it to you. I go, but do you have 10 other men that will do the same thing? So in my high school career, you got 11 people that's on the field for football. You can do everything within your parameter, tackle, block, whatever. But if you have someone that lets down, gives up that tackle, gives up that block, and you lose because of somebody else. That's why I chose the sport of wrestling. The definition of wrestling, it's a team sport based upon individual competition. The team can lose, and I can still
Win.
Yes. So that's why I chose wrestling as my independent sport to go on to college, but then also it was my avenue to go to college on a full athletic scholarship.
So how did you balance all that? How do you balance all the athletic and studying and
I don't
being
think-
still a high school kid?
I don't think there really is ever a true balance. Even now, at later in life, I still don't have that balance. It's kind of like I'm spending too much time over here, and then all of a sudden,
Like we
I'm
talked
other
about
stuff.
in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, your life isn't. Your traveling office is the car. I mean, today we were talking about. Right?
Again, even if you look at
Yeah.
today, I'm a 63-year-old guy, and I'm still. Well, it was 11 hours to drive here.
Yeah.
So I left Howell, Michigan. I think yesterday. I forget what time I ended up leaving there. Had to drive to Coldwater simply just to unload stuff, to repack stuff, and then leave there and drive, knowing that it was going to be sometime after midnight by the time I'd be getting in. How many people are going to do that, knowing that they'll be up the following morning, rise and shine, teach on the mat?
Did that the pro wrestling life did accommodate you to this? Because pro wrestlers travel a lot like crazy.
No, they do, but because professional wrestlers, they mostly perform later in the evening, so they might drive to the night knowing that they're going to sleep part of the day away.
Okay.
They're still going to do some type of training usually because professional wrestling is very visual. They want to see these monsters. They're not going out there to see 98-pound weaklings that don't look
Oh no.
ridiculous.
They
They
Unfortunately, as much as they try, it's not working.
wanna, they want to see these masters that go like, listen here, brother. They're flexing.
But you were not one of those.
No,
That's the thing, though. You were that silent killer.
But again, I came in as a different type of character. I'm still a character, but somewhat different. Mine was still the same portrayal of what I was portraying in the Ultimate Fighting Champions. I wore the exact same outfit, a sweaty T-shirt.
That's what I told Omar. I was educating him. There was an age difference here, but Omar, he's been an MMA fan, but I got him into pro wrestling because I'm a fan of it.
Yeah.
Like I said, how it started. But speaking of that, so let's take it down. So I want to take a top notch back if we don't jump around a lot if we got questions. But when you entered the UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? They didn't make it that easy for you because it looked like you as a pro wrestler. Isn't that was the situation going on, or what happened, right? Because I was talking to you about it. I don't know. They were like, coming in.
Well, what I had done was my UFC 4 was just my first entry into the place, and for UFC 4 I only had 5 days to prepare, and so I did a 5-day training camp, an hour and a half a day. I simply would leave Coldwater, Michigan. I would travel over to Lima, Ohio, to Al Snow's Body Slammers gym at the time, and because a professional wrestling ring was the closest thing that could come to a cage. You got to go back in time to realize that you could go at the time the UFC was forming. There was only one cage, and it was owned by the UFC.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, you can go to a lot of different communities, and you might find a full-size cage or sections of cage.
Yeah.
And instructors will say, "Well, we teach, cage walk tactics and all kinds of other stuff." And I kind of smile and go, most of these people can't spell MMA, let alone even do it. But everyone puts the problem.
Hey, sometimes goes to this thing. I'm sorry, but anyway, let's get.
Yeah. but no, I just looked at my opportunity to get into this event. It came about, So UFC number 4 was my very first one. I always trained for an hour and a half a day, for 5 days, and I was it. So again, what would you?
Well, so the thing is, to me, what I was interested in, everybody came in with their martial arts background,
Yes.
and you walked in.
Oh.
They knew you were the pro wrestler. That stand when you stand. You did that. That type of thing. You know how to rock. Different than anybody, and you understand that's not when you start involved in pro wrestling. You know how to rock the crowd. So
You want to get the crowd behind you.
Yes.
Because again, typically in professionals you have two characters, either the heel, the bad guy, or the baby face, the good guy.
Yeah.
And from the good guys, you want cheers, applause, that kind of stuff.
Bad guy, you get the
Yay.
boos.
Exactly. The bad guy, you want boos, hiss, as.
But you walked in a different territory.
But there's a psychological
Go on.
aspect to me.
That's what you were introduced today in your seminar.
And
Exactly.
when you walk out, like in professional wrestling, as they start to play your music alone,
Yeah, that face, the look.
you start to go, and then the moment that you walk through that curtain, whatever you're wearing, your posture, how you're carrying yourself to that ring, are you stopping along the way to interact with fans? The baby face might be doing the high fives, hey, cheer for me, all this kind of stuff.
You just walked in, man.
The heel, you kind of walk in and just look at people like you're wasting my time. But there's just different ways. But I went out there as I had a deadpan face.
Yes.
I was serious. I'm here on a mission. I don't care if all these people are here.
But that's how you
I'm
were
out
with a
here-
pro wrestler, though. That's what I'm saying.
But it is.
You did not change. I remember sitting and watching. I'm like, as people were talking around me, they're all excited about it. Some of them didn't even know you. It was
Exactly.
me and a few guys that was watching this during that 2 a.m. watching this. And I'm sitting here, I was like, but that's Dan Severn. Me, at 14 years old, used to seeing you perform. And I'm like sitting here and I'm watching. Everybody's like, all right.
But I wanted to stay true to me. I did not want to diminish what I had done throughout my career. I was proud of what I did as an amateur wrestler.
Yeah.
I was proud of what I did through my cage fighting career. So this was a carry over. I got to wear the same uniform. I luckily was matched up with Jim Cornette. He would bring out different belts, and he actually was my mouthpiece. Jim knew me. He knew that I was.
He speaks highly of you till this day.
Yeah, he knows that I am not going to cut a crazy promo.
Yep.
I don't have to. He just knows that he'll do all that for me, and all I got to do is go out there and break somebody. That's all. But I was actually like probably 20 years before Bill Goldberg came along.
I was going to get to that. You just jumped to that. It's okay. No.
But almost 30 years before Brock Lesnar came along.
So let me take a step back before we jump to that point, if you don't mind. So here's what I was going to say. So thinking about that moment, that time you walked in, Dan Severn was coming in, the Ultimate Fighter Championship. People looked at you. I was like, all right, this is a pro wrestler. That was kind of the presumption going on. You have pulled off the belly to back suplex, which is belly to back suplex that you guys see Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle do now, by the way.
Well, and they also call it the German.
The German suplex, of course. Yeah. You have pulled it off in a legit fight.
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
You'll see it a couple
which
times.
Which is now, by the way, Brock Lesnar 2021 doesn't. Let's be honest. I mean, two things. I'm going to crush them all together. So let me say this. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I've said this, and I don't care what people feel. If it wasn't, this is a compliment, but it's an honest-to-God compliment, and maybe you've heard it, but this is me, and I've said it to my 17-year-old son when I was talking about you and showing it to him. If it wasn't for Dan Severn, I do not believe we would have had the Bill Goldbergs. I do not believe we had the Brock Lesnars in pro wrestling. That image, because you did the opposite. They did the pro wrestling, and Bill, oh my God, they had the feel of the MMA fighter, and then Brock went to UFC.
Yeah.
But I do believe you have paved the way to that kind of intensity, that kind of character in pro wrestling by itself. And that multiple German suplex, you have pulled it off in a legit combative fight.
And the real aspect of that, that was my very first match ever. So I always say that making a first impression, it's always a good thing. I made a very good impression.
I mean, when I put that video when I was advertising and people watching it, they started go. I mean, like little Rex. When he was talking to you about watching it, he is dumbfounded to the fact that there's a German suplex can be pulled off like that. I was like, be careful, don't pull that off in a jiu-jitsu tournament, please.
Actually, the gentleman I pulled that off with, his name was Anthony Macias. And since that time, I've gotten to know Anthony Macias. He's a former amateur wrestler himself. He's a referee for mixed martial arts. He has a son that's a wrestler. And I've actually I told Anthony, go, please send me some of your son's matches, and I gave him back critiques. Have your son work on this, have him work on that, because what we talked about earlier, as good of a competitor as I was, I'm actually a much better coach.
Yeah. So let's go back to the UFC. So
Okay.
you're transitioning from pro wrestling to UFC. But
Yeah.
one of the things that struck me, you never signed a contract of exclusivity with UFC. So, and you kept your wrestling belts, you still walked with it. And you're new to the UFC, so let's go back to the time, not now. You're new to UFC, so you're walking in, you don't have any track record in the UFC. You're not really very well known, and you're the first wrestler essentially to walk into UFC. How could you pull it off? How could you convince them to let you do what you want to do and not sign your life away?
I mean, literally walking off with the NWA Championship belt. Then an organization that has their own championship belt, and they look down on pro wrestling. Let's be honest, they did. They're like, that fake stuff.
The UFC wanted nothing to do with professionals because they were the real deal. We're not professional.
And that's how they build it. We are the real deal.
It was just, it's kind of like, Mel Gibson's Thunderdome. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
So how did you convince them?
Well, I mean, it was just, I had a good attorney with me at the point in time. I basically, he's a good negotiator, and he actually did all that for me. I said, this is what I want.
Yeah.
I only ever planned on doing just a couple UFCs. The first time, I told that a single family member, I just wanted to go out there and test my skills. Can I get to that person before they get to me? And so I became the runner-up in UFC number 4, and with only training 5 days, I thought, well, take a second, kind of sucks. I get to come back. So in UFC number 5, it's kind of going, okay, I'll take out 32 days of my life. I'll block it out. I'm going to leave my family behind. I'm going to go out to Arizona. I'm going to train. I stayed by myself. I slept myself. I ate by myself. And a lot of the things I was training, it was by myself. I had throwing dummies. I had a wall-mounted dummy, and I had a spring-loaded dummy. These were my 3 most reliable workout partners. But I did also work with wrestlers and submission grab people. I actually stayed at Grand Canyon University. One of my friends that found out I was there, he called me up, and he says, you need to come meet this guy who was teaching at a NHB type class at a university. But he's trying to teach him about the business course and stuff like that, so that if you're going to run a martial arts school, you know how to stay, how to run the books, how to do collections and things of that nature. So I went over there, and he basically fell in love with it, and it basically had it set to where I was actually staying at Grand Canyon University. So now I have just like a little, think of a student type of apartment, but it was like very Spartan. I had a black and white television. Most people don't know what black and white television is. On a crate, and I had, I think, 3 UFC VHS tapes, and that was all I watched. Watching just those 3 tapes.
Well, you mentioned that in the seminar. Back in the day, you didn't have these phones to Google your opponent. I mean, I was laughing. I looked at Jen Case, and I was like, I leaned to her like this. I'm like, it's terrible to admit that these days, we even Google who we're going to go against in a grappling match.
Yeah. Oh, you do. And you can see footage, and you can learn all about it. But that's all part of, I'm a big advocate of education. The more that you can know about your opponent, the more ways you should be able to come up with ways to throw them off their game, whether it's psychological or you realize, okay, they're really good at this, stay away from this, and attack other weak type areas. So again, the Googling type aspect, that's there now. Even as I said earlier, how many competitors, whether it be male or female, could walk into a Friday night press conference? There wasn't a weigh-in because there was no weight class. So you could easily be, anywhere that's sitting around that 180 to 220 pound range, but also now you got this 350 pound monster over here.
Yeah.
That's like, oh my God. But you're meeting these 7 other competitors the night before at a press conference because there's no way. But we're at this Friday night event. All 8 men show up because again, the ladies weren't competing yet at that time. You have a commentator there that's mediator that's actually prevalent over the whole event. Contestant number 1, Ken Sharman, please stand on up, and then they'll go through his height, his weight, what his background is, and then he'll sit right down. And then contestant number 2, Hoist Gracie, please stand up. They go through. So they just basically talk about the 8 different people. So literally, as you're up there, you're for the first time ever, you're learning about the 7 other competitors. Then they pull out a bingo ball machine. It has 8 balls in there that have names of either Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, Dan Severn, whatever. They spin around, pop one out, boom, Hoist Gracie. Spin around, boom, Ken Shamrock. Match number 1. So less than 24 hours before you're about to step into the cage and compete against them in a no-holds-barred match that you found out. And at that time, I can't grab my cell phone. I can't, hey Siri, and all of a sudden find out who Hoist Gracie is. What does he do? What's his martial art? You can do that today, but back then you had nothing to work with.
Siri picked up.
She did.
She did.
Which is funny because, you know, even in some legal court cases now, there's been arguments amongst people. Things went really sour, but when they go back, they looked into the records of series and they came up with incriminating evidence.
Yes.
Well, we were 2 Middle Easterns. God help us.
Yeah.
The things we said.
So,
Probably not much further than what this old boy has said.
so do you think, based on the UFC today versus the UFC back then, do you think the UFC is basically watering down to sell more tickets, or do you think it's going in the right direction to encourage more fans to attend, or do you think it's just, you know, it wouldn't sell in today's age what's happening, you know, back in your day?
Yeah. Collaboration of several things. First off, the onslaught attack from politicians, legislators, athletic commissioners trying, first off, to do away with this barbaric sport inside of a cage. Because, I mean, no other sport, other than if you start go back to your gladiator days of when the gladiator would have to go out there and fight to the death in some type of Coliseum match, which, you know, I see where that could actually be brought back, but it's for a different time.
Hey, none in this country at the moment. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Well,
They get enough hate comments.
We, me and him already, we got blocked so many times or stuff like this, so yeah, we can.
Yeah. We'll have some discussions afterwards. we might want to be the first promoters to actually implement some of these.
Hey, there we go. There we go. Let's trademark that quick.
Exactly.
But so here's the thing. Okay, so that time, in the period of time, UFC as you transitioned, as things growing, and you winning UFC 5, you nailed it. Yeah, you became improved it. Hey, I asked a question today in front of my students, and I said, I'm going to do the podcast, but I'll bring it up because it was an iconic picture, and I would never forget. And then it ended up in the Hoist Gracie documentary. I'm like, I'm going to ask the man himself.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm a fan of the Beast before I'm a fan of the Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu. And to be honest with you, I don't care what people's feeling is. This is what we are about in this podcast. I've learned when I moved to Brazil, I mean, lived in a moment there, trained by them, to be honest with you. That's Gi Jiu-Jitsu. That's how I learned. It was in Brazil.
Yeah.
In 2009, I stayed there, and Frega de Gonisi was my first Jiu-Jitsu coach. And he kind of... I was just being the American that saw the jiu-jitsu here, and it was Haley and the Gracie family. And I would never forget, he was like, calm down. We'll talk about jiu-jitsu. Put that to the side. I'm like, and my head turned like my English bulldog. I got to the side. I'm like, you know better than I do, but you were that generation. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what are we talking about here? Okay, so you broke it down. I'm not going to get into details, but I said, this is jiu-jitsu. Put that to the side. So, going forward, I would never forget the time when you were, let's be honest, you were beating the bejesus of Hoist at that time. You had an eye-to-eye contact with Helio Gracie.
Yeah, I was at Hoist's guard.
Uh-huh.
I just take a look over.
Exactly.
Yes.
He looked at you and he was doing this. It was a notorious picture. And I was looking at video, and I go back to the footage, even though on YouTube, it's like, did Dan say something? Because I saw you looking at it.
What?
But I don't know if it was verbal or it was just a visual.
At the time, his arms were down. And as I look over at him, I think to myself, because I was being kind in this match. Even though it doesn't look like I'm being kind. In my opinion, you were not, but okay. Well, but even
when watching it.
But if you look at the history, the previous two people that I went up against, I never threw any strikes. I just did all just amateur wrestling techniques too. And
Until you met him, though.
Yeah. Until the third match.
Yep.
And now I realize, again, you have to realize I only trained for 5 days. An hour and a half a day. I'm not from a fighting background. I'm a competitor. An amateur wrestler who teaches principles of leverage.
I mean, we had one of our young students today, little Rex, asking him, was like, he never seen you throw a fist until you went against host.
He asked an excellent question. And I go, it wasn't until several minutes into this match that what stuff I was attempting was not working that well. And I think myself, I think I'm going to have to hit this guy.
Okay.
But I always tell people that I was more torn with struggle with my conscience than I ever was with a human being. And then, probably somewhere at that point, I was kind of going, as I'm down inside his guard, I'm basically going, well, boom, I'll hit like one palm shot, boom, on the side, okay, well, I get nice little thump right there, but it's kind of gets his attention, rattles the cage a little bit. Well, maybe that hurt a little bit. Well, okay, he doesn't seem to didn't respond too much. Well, maybe we'll pop just a little bit more on this side, to where, that there was that point then where I look up over at Helio at that point, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking to myself, I go, you kill your kid out here right now.
You had that look. I mean, it was there for a brief moment. There's an iconic picture of footage of you literally looking at him, a horse is under you, and you looked at the old man.
And he has a towel in his hand, and as he looks at me, he brings that towel right up in here, puts it up, it just crosses his arm, and just shakes his head no. And I'm thinking, you old bastard, you let me kill your kid out here, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, I know what I did in my heart, and can I live with it? Sure, I can live with it. But there was a reason in my final 5 years of competition, I was trying for one more match right in a row. If I could have one more match with Mark Coleman, a Ken Shamrock, a Hoist Gracie right in a row. I mean, for different reasons that I
you've said it on the record, and I do agree. It was that match we haven't seen Hoist Gracie until 5 years later.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so,
but you have to look at Art Davie and Jorge Gracie were the two people that were heading up the very first Ultimate Fighting Championship. It was Art Davie who was the businessman and the brainchild of the Ultimate Fighting Championships. He had different concepts of what this cage should be designed like. I mean, there were some really crazy ideas that they had with it. But you got to realize that Art Davie was merely a businessman. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to simply pit two men against each other and in a unregulated type of a martial arts contest where they could any kind of strike, any kind of grappling technique, any boxer versus sumo versus taekwondo versus karate. So it was just to see what style and or individual is going to reign supreme.
to be honest, and I've said this to my students, as much as I'm a self-defense instructor, like I said, my background was graphic. From judo to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, it's my passion. And like I said, I don't teach as much. I implement it in my self-defense because I tell people, you got to go to the fucking ground. Don't kid yourself. Mm-hmm. You've taught military, I mean, you've taught police and all that, so you understand that. But I do believe it was that tournament, even though whatever the outcome of that UFC 4, but then UFC 5, you've reigned supreme. I do believe that's when it showed the world, UFC 4, UFC 5, grappling is king. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, good. UFC 4, I only trained for 5 days.
No, I get it.
And I walked into and I showed what just an amateur wrestler can do.
That speaks volumes to what I'm saying.
No,
grappling
so is, and even fast forward to today, I can still take that high level wrestler, and if they just are with me for the next 20 to 30 days, I could teach them concepts that again I know how to relate to them, to where they would do very well now. There's some things that are still not being explored by a lot of these athletes. I've got notes in my journals of
evidence today what you did in the seminar. The concept today you did just pinning someone to the wall or the cage.
Yeah.
You've said today I had MMA fighters looking at me. I'm like, I just did this.
Yeah. But then talk about different matches because I brought one scenario of Conor McGregor versus Cowboy Cerrone, and being in the clinch position, and then Conor McGregor come back and punch you with that shoulder. And the night that
I know
happened,
everybody calls it a Conor McGregor shoulder thing. I was like, no, that's been there.
My cell phone exploded that night when that happened because I had all these people that were calling me like going, did Conor McGregor finally take a seminar from you? Well, like I said, if I go, had he done that, he would have followed up with this, and this, because there's certain things I've been teaching from close quarter combatives, from the clinch, that most people still have not done, but they fit within the realm of the rules. Because I'm a big advocate of getting education. Understand the rules and know how to exploit them. And I know that Big John McCarthy knows that I'm that guy that as they make up rules, none of these, name me one owner of a promotion that has ever climbed that cage. Did Dana White climb in the cage? Did the Fertitta brothers who owned UFC climb in that cage? Did Bob Byrowitz was another owner of the cage?
When you said that at the academy, I had him first. And I'm not trying to bring names because we don't cause drama, but him and a few students, looked at me like, sounds like somebody needs to hear this. So I'm bringing this, and it's unfortunately my success in what I do. I mean, that's what I'm lucky and I'm blessed. Like BJJ Fanatics, I do DVDs with them now and that. There's a lot. Take it out combative situation when I talk about sports combative, because a lot of, unfortunately, the combative community, like I belong to the Krav Maga also community, that's my third pedigree. When it comes to jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, maybe wrestling, because I only did it in high school, but I did a lot of catch, especially when I trained with Coach Eric Paulson. Helped me as I go up, more. That's all like in my 30s when I got involved with CSW. And Ben Jones and all those, and opened my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, it's like I said. I told the story, and I don't think Josh Barnett even knows this. My first introduction dealing with catch wrestling, I was at a seminar where Eric Paulson and Josh Barnett were there, and I rolled with Josh Barnett. I really hated my life that day. I hated my fucking life that day. I was 30 years old, and I'm sitting here. Josh Barnett's like, let's roll. I'm like, you know what? One of my idols. I'm like, oh, man, he beat the shit out of me. And I'm like thinking so mad. I ended up in a position, I looked at him, I'm like, I'm about to walk off because this is not normal. And then after the roll, he slapped me back in the hand. He's like, good job, kid. I looked at him, I was like, I'm 30 years old. I was already pissed. I was getting snapped. Cow catcher till your chin hits the floor. I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? Why is he doing this to me? I was like thinking, I'm like, what did I do wrong here? But that was it, getting into business,
No, I understand.
13 years ago. So I still was stubborn, being who I am. I was like, all right, I'm going to join these folks, but goddamn did I get a beating. But we got to soothe it out, and, he did his thing, and that's fine. But the self-defense community is haunted. And it bothers me, and I think you understand this, when even though I'm a black belt, let's say in Krav Maga on that side, other than everything I've done, I don't think they understand combat sports. And they have this vision that a combat sports person cannot take their chance. And I even told this, if you don't train wrestling, jiu-jitsu, I say Muay Thai, you might learn a few things you can work with a drunk. You get one of those guys, they'll fuck you up.
Yeah. Well, to play off of that, when you think about the martial arts world, when you talk about bow staffs, nunchucks, sickles,
karate, folks.
When I look at that, when you walk down the sidewalk, I can't be walking down the sidewalk with a bow staff. I can't be walking down.
Somebody will call the cops on me.
Exactly, without drawing.
We have somebody in the plaza that did that. But I didn't call the cops on him. I was laughing about it.
At the same time, I can't walk down the sidewalk wearing a judo gi or a jiu-jitsu gi, again, without drawing attention to yourself. So when you can understand grappling ability, one of the greatest things I ever saw, again, was at my freshman year at Arizona State. I actually regaled you in the story earlier of little Billy Rosado. He was the 118-pounder at Arizona State, but at 118 pounds, he was underweight. At a collegiate weight level, they don't have the 118-pound class at all anymore. It's a 125. That's the lightest weight class. But he competed internationally at the 105.5-pound weight class. Well, he's out at a bar with a bunch of other wrestlers, and a fight breaks out. So you got this big old football player who's probably 6'3" or more, probably 200, I don't know, let's say 270 to 280 pounds. He takes like a big old haymaker swing at a little bit of ground. He ducks under, goes behind this big football player, locks him right around the waist, belly to back, suplex, knocks him right out because he hits his head on the asphalt.
It's done.
Game over.
Yep.
So no one else really gets hurt, I think. But then the football player's girlfriend pulls out a knife, stabbing Biller's out. I'm thinking he succeeds in one area, simply just gets stabbed into another.
And I get that point. And I say that to my students. The only thing I have different when I teach them, because I bring these elements, of course, when the firearm pulls open, knife. And here's the problem I have personally. I don't care what art. Once that bladed steel comes out and that firearm comes out, he's a firearm instructor. He teaches it to the level of military, to the level of self-defense. And he is blunt. And I laugh at him because people said to me what they said to him. You guys are not make money. I was like, because we're fucking honest? Because I tell people, it's like, right now, if that door got kicked in, somebody has a gun?
It's over.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
There's no training.
Waves their machine gun out of both of them. What are we going to do? Three of us.
That's it.
Yeah.
What Fu Manchu that they say we can disarm?
Yeah.
He says by the doors, just pull the trigger. We're done.
There's no wax out, no magical.
Blades come. And here's the thing, what I have a problem with, I do teach, if it didn't get displayed, you got your hands on it, that's fine. You can fight it.
Yeah.
But do understand, as the blade moves, it cuts. It cuts. And it's cutting meat.
Yeah, you got to realize you're going to get cut if you're, but know it by keeping arms out like this, where it's going to get cut here.
That's exactly. Not giving these.
You're not hitting
But let's be honest, there is a limitation to compared to when you start training in some combat sport, we know how to grab and dealing with a human moving and even with your fist and kicks and that. So taking back to what I'm trying to say, and going back to the core of training, which I have an issue with the combative community in person, which they did for longest time, and even I laugh when they say to him, because he's a firearm instructor, they're like, you're not going to make money. I was like, yeah, because he's honest, he still has people, and I'm the same. I mean, I got lucky to get a deal with BJJ Fanatic. They're like, okay, so this is the guy that teaches combative, but he's grappling. And I was like, yeah. And I did a whole DVD series on this. But again, talking to you, as I said, different than anything, I will never forget, and I think you would appreciate this. I was a bouncer, and I tell these students the story. I'm the bouncer on the inside, not the outside, because I'm 5'7". I'm not the intimidating guy. Most of the big guys are not, they're just bodies. They have no, some of the guys we have. I would never forget, I looked at this dude, and he had your typical 5'8", 5'7" kind of wrestler look. I looked at his ear, I'm like, oh boy. This might be a trouble. When I looked at him, I just saw the ear.
Okay.
He was minding his thing, and he was holding a soda. I'm like, okay, here comes the football players fucking with him. It's funny you said that. And now, when I was a kid, I would never forget, they swung at him. All I saw him picking them up, bang their head on the wall, up there the ceiling, and dropped them at the side of the bar stool. Took him out. I looked at him, me being the guy, I was like, I need to take you out before they come in with their homies. Of course, it was okay, and he got out of it because the camera saved his life.
Yeah.
But going to what you said, once they get their hands on you, you're gonna go sky miles. And I would never. It was a big football, and he banged them up. But I think he just scooped them to the side, bang, and just dropped them. I'm like, wow.
Even like today's seminar, I just taught two basic concepts. We all have body weight. And the biggest, strongest muscles are our body, our legs. Knowing how to use our skeletal system, how to lift people up. So if I squat down, lock around toward now as I stand back up, it's not my arms doing all the work. My arms are nothing more holding mechanisms. It's my legs. Mm-hmm. So when you think about what you can,
he did the correct lift in front of me. It was amazing to watch. And to me, that's what I'm saying. Everybody freaked out, and I'm sitting mesmerized about such a good job done.
But I always say that my freshman year at Arizona State, I had to work out with the 190 pounders because that's the weight class I came in for 190. But then I worked with the 177 pounders, 190 pounders, and the heavyweights. Mm-hmm. Heavyweight weight class, now there's a ceiling that you cannot weigh over 285 pounds. But that only came about somewhere, I'll say in the 1980s, is that came into play. So the heavyweight that I had to work at Arizona State, Big James Mitchell. Big James Mitchell weighed 420 pounds. So in the preseason, 7 days a week, 3 times a day, I had to work out with James Mitchell along with other people. But I always tell people that I could throw Big James Mitchell, and when you know that you can launch 420 pounds, when you finally get somebody that's somewhere in your weight class category, I can really make them fly.
It's easy, yeah.
Piece of cake.
So taking off sports, talk about growing up in cold water.
Well, again, I'm not. A lot of my family friends, they get upset because you always say cold water. I go, that's where I lived at that time. My amateur wrestling background would have been from Montrose, Michigan.
Oh, okay. Well,
so Montrose, Michigan is where, I grew up on a farm right on the border of 2 different school systems. The New Lothrop school system and the Montrose school system, but grew up on a farm. 7 other brothers and sisters, 120-acre farm. So when people say, well, you're one of them farm boys, oh yeah. Yep. And farm boys are pretty darn strong because we're used to baling hay, cleaning out pig pens, the whole 9 yards, shovel this, shoveling shit there.
When I was telling you the story, I was like, my best backup, and when we're talking about people, they say, oh, white people like this, I was like, honestly, I got a couple of good farm boys, and me. I'm a brown dude from Middle East, even though I'm Arab American. I was like, I'll pick up the phone and I call my farm boys. I don't give a damn what is the situation. All they say, we're coming. They'll come in with their 4 trucks and chuck us all the way to the city. I live in the city. And that's, I like I said, in heart, I even grew up like when my grandmother is an Austrian on a farm, So I can understand it. But so when I was taking the question is like, growing up in cold water, 1960s, 1970s, how is that time comparing it to now?
Well,
I know that is
different time era altogether. I had 7 other brothers and sisters. I'm second on the totem pole. So you learn real quick that you're sharing everything. I don't think I ever had my first. I don't remember when I ever had my first bedroom to myself because I always had a room that I had to share another a room with one of my other brothers, and then going from that to going to Arizona State. Again, I had to share a room with my older brother at the time. My brother Dave went to Arizona State, and I kind of followed in his footsteps. So it just you learn to share, but to me, growing up on a farm, there's a lot of great things that I learned from that time era as well. The sharing, you never threw nothing away because on a farm, you simply you're going to refurbish this piece of machinery. Yep. It's going to you have to use it again and again and again. You simply know that repurpose it. You hear that more and more.
Yeah.
That has been done forever. But then going to the Goodwill, going to the Salvation Army because you're buying stuff. To me, it's like even still to this day, I'll still go to a Goodwill and a Salvation Army. You'd be surprised how many nice, cool sports jackets. Sure, I could go buy a brand new suit because I just need a couple sports jackets. Boom, go get them. $15-20. Done. So it's the frugality of Dan Severn. I don't like to wear suits and ties. I'm not going to drop a lot of money.
I have that problem until this day.
Yeah,
but he does a better job than me.
Yeah. But there are different martial arts events that you're invited to that you should show up in a sports jacket, a tie. You can't just always show up.
He's on my ass about it. Sometimes he's on me. I'm like, oh. What my issue was suit and tie because being a bodyguard, I did that a lot.
Well, you can't show me. Maybe a tie could be used against you.
No. My tie was all a clip-on. I learned that from England. Yeah. When I learned my bodyguarding in England because it was judo based. Because think about it, you've been there in England. It's all the weather and it's all jackets. So that's why combative judo was different. Mm-hmm. But when I learned my bodyguarding skills from there, all of our ties were clip-ons. Yeah, because you do not want somebody to haul them down.
Otherwise, it's a choking mechanism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So. That's interesting.
but even then, more and more law enforcement gear is changing to more of an athletic type of a shoe.
It is.
For foot pursuit, you got to realize it's got to be more stretchy to givability type of pants because foot pursuits, it's tougher when you got body armor on. You try to do a foot pursuit, especially when you have a duty belt on, and then you might have a taser strapped to your leg, and you know, just other stuff that's all there.
That's great that you talk about that because I've unfortunately here's the thing. I'm the guy. I call myself the devil's advocate between the self-defense community and the combat sport. It's just rarely you get somebody in combat sports. Let me put it that way because I don't know why they call it that because they think people in combat sports don't know how to defend themselves, which is dumb.
There are some people are good competitors.
Dumb.
That's about it.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. But flipping the page, if you think about it, not a lot of people teach it because this is why when I was a combative instructor in the military, I was doing in Fort Leavenworth, I was teaching the MPs. It was so heavy when I went in there. I got when I looked around to see what's going on, and people don't understand the clothing of the military did require grappling training. If you think about it, because I mean you've been there, you know how that goes, but the argument that keeps going, and I want to give you the way to speak on this. And for some reason, I hamper so hard in the self-defense community because I am that self-defense instructor that's kind of anti-self-defense. The way they go in it.
You question it. So
Yes.
To me, it's like I'm looking at a car. I want to check underneath the hood. I want to kick the tires. I want to find out, is this actually a good car? Yeah. Is this actually a good technique?
Yeah. So my issue with them, this is me personality, because me personally, being a heavy grappling background from judo and wrestling, that's what I started, even though I have Muay Thai and I competed in it, my grappling is my way to go. I think I have an issue in believing their argument about get on the ground and get up. I was like, how do you not understand when somebody's on top of you is not that easy? So talking to you, let's forget about Dan Severn, the fighter. I'm talking about Dan Severn, the coach. Dan Severn, the husband. Dan Severn, the father. How do you feel when you hear in people in self-defense that says grappling is bullshit in self-defense? I know your answer, but I want forget the fighter aspect of you. Being the coach, the father, and the husband.
Yeah. Well, again, there's tactics for the competitor. But now if you think about it in just everyday life, okay, I have daughters, I have a wife. These are people that are vulnerable to being attacked, whether they're assaulted on their feet, or if someone's going to try to take them down, to be raped or something of that nature. And I do teach like a women's self-defense class, and I do teach a women's rape defense class.
Absolutely.
So one is like all on your feet, and the other one is down on the ground, sunny side up or over easy, because rape's all going to happen one of a couple of different ways. So again, you have to put them in a position. And I've had different ladies that come to class, and you can just see that now they're getting the heebie-jeebies because they have someone else that's getting in between their legs. I go, you need to get out of this class. You came here to try to understand what are some things you need to do to prevent from being, and it's only going to happen one of two different ways. So some people have to say you just need to leave, and there's other people that come in there, but if they can work with another female, they feel just a little bit more comfortable. And I get all that, but there is a world of difference in man's strength versus a woman's strength. It's got it like again, we live in this world, this PC world, that I don't belong to anymore because there is no comparison between a woman's strength and a man's strength. There are some women that have a lot more strength than what they're probably gifted with, but the reality is men are stronger than women.
For instance, you have worked with my students. You met Atsuko, the Japanese student I have?
Yes.
And her husband.
Yeah.
She and her husband, they're both black belts under me, but they've been with me 12, 15, almost 13 years. Okay? Let's be honest. Atsuko, she's in her 50s. She even knows. And that's why I work with her grappling. I mean, what is her punch going to do to me? Or you?
Be almost like an insect.
Thank you.
Strike.
And this is my issue with the combative community and even the Krav Maga community. Oh yeah, you can do the elbows. I'm like, are you fucking serious? I can drop that bombs here. I'm being serious. Because here is somebody in her mid-50s. What is her punch to her size compared to me? And I'm a 43. You're talking about a buck that is in his 20s.
Yeah.
Going bulldozing against this woman.
No, I think that the problem is they think they're short-visioned. They think that they can dictate how it's going to happen. You know, they dictate that. I've heard that from people around you.
Oh, of course, you know that.
I will never go to the ground. Okay, cool. But that's not a choice. I don't have that privilege of telling a guy attacking me, hey, in case I fall, let's wait a second till I get up and we continue this.
Yeah, I'm going to do my combative get up, and then we're going to get a second.
It doesn't happen. Like, you know, people always think of the best time situation to get attacked. My last time I got attacked with a knife was on the beach in Florida in swim trunks.
I was laughing, by the way, about that. I don't know why he has bad luck.
You know, I wasn't in my, you know, and shirts and stuff where I can use a belt to stop the bleeding and all the fancy stuff that they teach in these self-defense schools. I'm in swim trunks on the beach with nothing but flip-flops. So, okay, what do you do now? And they always hear the argument, I will never go down. And it's the new generation, I feel like they're watching MMA and they're learning 2-3 things. I watched a guy that tried to put a chokehold on a guy that took 45 minutes. The people were recording, they called the cops, and he still have a chokehold.
This is a real story.
They were negotiating with him.
It was the longest video I've seen, 45 minutes.
They were like, you should let go of him, and you have a chokehold on him. And I'm like, how do you have a chokehold on him for 45 minutes? Like, the cops showed up, and you still have a chokehold on the guy.
Obviously,
and he was trying to actually choke him.
You never took the seminar from Dan Severn of how to utilize flip-flops as a martial arts degree right now. Especially if you had both flip-flops. Now, again, I'm being totally facetious here right now, but
it's
you'd
funny
be surprised.
to watch. They learn a thing or two, and they see it on TV, and they try to implement it, and they try to dictate the rules. So, I have guys that show up to my classes that say, I will never get in a fist fight. I have a gun for a reason. I'm like, okay, what happens if a guy shoots
but you're trained as well.
in the face, and then now you can't draw your gun? What happens?
Yeah, it's the bad person that only knows when things are going to go down.
Exactly.
Everyone else walks into an environment. You're not really anticipating this. Now, there are different times when you go into an environment, you might just pick up like, I'm in a bad place or something like that.
You know, the best one, and I give credit to one of our black belts in our jiu-jitsu community. I highly respect him, Jason Bircher. He sees me, he laughs because I belong to the jiu-jitsu community, but I'm in a combative community. So, you know, it's almost like a bipolar relationship. But I'm hard in the combative community because, you know, hard test their stuff. And of course, they're like, well, how are you going to hard test eye gouging and ball grabbing? I'm like, y'all are just crazy. You just whose balls you going to grab when he's just plunging your face and banging your head on the floor? This stuff doesn't work.
Right.
Let's please. I mean, I'm a drunk guy all night long. If he's just like, so he said to me, and I would never forget. He said, Fraz, and I will credit. He's like, self-defense people work on concept.
Okay.
But he said, us, we try our shit. We test it.
Yeah.
Between wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and we test it. We're like, oh shit, this didn't work when I got this 25-year-old buck pinning me to the wall, and I am punching him, and I'm like, okay, this is not moving.
Yeah. But there's also add the element of an adrenaline dump.
That crazy part. And then add to it if a weapon got displayed. And this just drives me insane to this day. I do understand. Yes, the combat sport community needs to understand when things are like this get displayed. Total different animal. I just said, if somebody walked in with a gun now, what are we going to do?
Our goose is cooked.
I mean, let's be honest. But there's was my issue with the combative self-defense people. They don't say that honestly.
Well, there's a lot of people in the martial arts world that they're looking at their paydays. And they want to keep the paydays going. Sometimes you can't please everyone. You can't give everyone something to work with. I mean, there are some people who's kind of going, you best be at your best behavior and try not to go into bad neighborhoods and, mind your P's and Q's and always be aware. And you better live in a very gated community and things of that nature. But there are some people that live that type of lifestyle. But most of us have to go to work on a daily basis, and we have to interact with people that maybe we don't care for them as much, but they're part of the workforce. They're going to be around us.
So let's play devil advocate. Do you think it's the people mentality that's forcing this? Let's call it bullshit teaching. Because the people are so washed up, they don't want to attend training for 8 years. They don't want to train for 10 years. They want to attend the seminar for a weekend with you or Filas, or they want to learn guns from me, and then they never show up again, and they think they're like, I learned something.
They walk away with that certificate. They put up, oh yeah,
Yeah, I'm like, I learned something. I don't need to train for 10 years. So they think it's the washed up mentality that no child left behind. They just want to get that certification and think in their head they're convinced.
Yeah.
And if you start teaching real stuff, they don't want to learn it because it takes too long.
Well, obviously, you gentlemen already know that if you really want to know a technique or tactic, you have to train it.
Yeah.
And if you want to stay relevant, ongoing training as well. Be it about the wacky world of professional wrestling, I've been hurt far worse in my professional wrestling career than I have been in all of my cage fights combined. And then people are going to say, well, how's that possible? What is real and what is not? But the reality is that when you're involved in like professional wrestling, you start to move up in this hierarchy where you become more veteran. You start to relax a little bit more. You're not doing as much training as much as you once did. And maybe all you really do is simply just showing up and doing an occasional match. But you're not doing any training whatsoever, so your game is off. And that's how people get hurt. That's how people's careers come to an end when you think you can still pull off a move. Because everyone wants to look great in a match and like going, Omar, we're going to climb up to the top rope, and I'm going to pick you on up, and I'm going to jump off and do a body splash.
I would pay to see that if it's going to happen to you.
I'm busy that day. I'm out of the country.
He watches so much, I take it for so much. I would pay to see that
Just
happen.
remember to have a trip coming up.
Yeah.
I'll be up in the country, whatever day that is.
But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, wow, that would look really cool, but can Dan actually pull that off? Because
without killing me.
If a Dan doesn't pull this off, it could be the end of your career, it could be the end of your life. And there are some professional wrestlers where things have gone wrong.
Your
And
era,
now their career has...
that have happened in the era, the rising of the Attitude Era. That has happened a few times.
Well, that was something that we talked about even before even doing this, the podcast here.
Yes.
The most viewed combat match in history is Don Fry versus Takayama.
That corner fight
So,
when they just punched that. Yep.
It's in Pride, I think. One of it's a Pride fight.
Yep.
But when the referee says fight, they literally they're coming towards each other and they start throwing punches from a distance to where they get where each of them have
Clinch.
a collar tie.
Yep.
They have a collar tie and they're punching each other in the face just like this. It's almost like a game of chicken. It's kind of like I'm punching you in the face.
It looked like, if you think
son of a
about
bitch.
it, almost like pro wrestling in a corner when they crap. And,
Yes,
yeah, but they
were
really
punching each
did
other
it.
for real. And it's kind of like, punch you in the face. Do you give up? No, I'm going to keep punching you in the face. Do you give up? Now, who won? The crowd actually won that match because the crowd seen something that I guarantee they will never see again.
No. Nobody. I will never see anybody do that again.
You might see some people remimic that in professional wrestling, but
Yes.
never in a cage fight because the toll that it took on both people. Now, the reason for telling a story like this was both Don Fry and Takayama also had professional wrestling backgrounds as well.
Yep.
And Takayama, after that fight, and up to like little over somewhere that 2 year, maybe just over 2 years ago realm, Takayama was involved in a professional match, in a very routine technique known as a sunset flip. Very basic routine. Went awry, went wrong. And the guy fell backwards, basically breaking Takayama's neck.
Yeah.
And he's now a quadriplegic for life.
I saw the videos of Don Fry visiting him, and it
Yes.
brought me to tears, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. To see, because I'm a fan of that era, and just watching, and I just see Don hugging him.
Well, you
And
see the two warriors.
yeah,
there right now.
yeah, literally. The warriors of my generation, and just seeing Don, hugging him and just kissing him on the head, and I'm like, my God.
Yeah.
It just takes. And to be honest with you, to take it to that time, even forward, let's say when pro wrestling comes in, which gets a lot of hound, but it has a different respect now than it did that time, to be honest with you.
Agreed.
And I truly believe you are, maybe people's like, oh, he's being a fanboy, but I'm being honest. What you've done in the UFC have made people like, Okay. The kind of lifted eye on pro wrestling, but you were not as active then after that than when you hit that WWF Attitude Era, when you made your debut. So, saying that to our crowd, I mean, I got a bunch of our fans are now in the time of they coming in with pro wrestling as it is now more extravagant than it is. PC more than it ever been, let's be honest. Okay. Other than AEW, I gotta give them credit. They're bringing that Attitude Era in that time, which I am preferring them now right now. Well, I got a couple of WWE friends in there, they're gonna get mad at me on this, but hey, I'm honest, your product is being bullshit.
The ratings are proving it though.
That's my point. I got a couple of friends that even in they're the ones that's talent management, and they were like, you watching this shit? I was like, hey man, I've been watching your stuff and I've been turning it off. It's been irritating me. So let's be honest.
The people are speaking. If they wish to watch your product, they want to watch.
There we go. I mean, you've done. You brought Brian Cage. You brought a couple of people. You and Don have been honest about your opinion. Preferred. So taking it to that time, that Attitude Era. When you debuted, in my opinion, you were the first one to introduce the double leg takedown, which is the spear. When you took off Black. Here we go. Before Bill Goldberg and Lesnar or Roman Reigns, who does the spear right now, I will never forget the day when you walked in with Cornette behind you screaming, and you just. I was in attendance in St. Louis. You double leg blasted Steve Blackman. Yeah. And I'm like, I just watched. I'm like, I know what a double leg takedown is, but goddamn, you just flew across that ring with him. Yeah. Was that?
But there's ways of understanding the ring and how to utilize it, because like with a lot of people, I'll let them start to push me backwards, and as they push me backwards, I'll spin around just before we get to the ropes, and I'll jab them into the ropes, knowing that the ropes are like rubber bands. I push them out, knowing that what goes out is eventually going to come right back in. As I start to feel this momentum come right back in, I launch an incredible belly to belly, to where I can launch, I don't care how big they are, knowing that as I launch them, they're scared. They're going, well, how are you going to throw me? Straight over your head or this? No, I'm going to do a normal, safest one, to where literally as I launch you, you're going to be like catapulted across this, and you're going to just go to cartwheel. You can actually go cartwheel, and you can go right out of the ring, which looks pretty cool. And you figure you're on one side, guy throws you, he just sees you just spin the spiral right out of the ring altogether.
But that takedown that you did.
But you can do the same thing where you shoot him on the end and you collide as you hit him. I try to teach him to where it looks great, but again, it's in the magical, mystical world of professionals. I
don't know. I was in attendance, and I'm like, because I didn't. That was you just walked in and you beat the hell out of 3-4 people. You walked in. I'm like, holy cow, that's Dan Severn. That's when he walked in. It's a beating, and here's James Cornette holding your belts and screaming in the background, which I want to get into in a second. But did you plan that double leg spear, or you just pulled it off?
Those were things that I knew I was going to be good at. You might be in a match, can't script everything else.
Yeah,
you have to have a general idea. Typically, when you're working for a major company like a WWE, they're looking for you to fill a certain window of time. They want a certain outcome because the monthly pay-per-views are all based upon you moving forward, you winning matches, and winning matches in a certain way so that we can sell more pay-per-views at the end of the month. And we have to have multiple storylines going, because if something happens in one of your matches and you get hurt, you're out of that company pay-per-view, but the other 4 or 5 storylines are still going to move forward, and hopefully we'll come up with a new match for whoever your partner was going to be in the match. So again, it's a very unique, professionals is a very unique, ongoing, I call it the soap opera.
I mean, that's what it is.
You got your daily, or I should say your weekly shows that lead up to the monthly pay-per-view to see the big match, and then by the following week, now you have new storylines that are coming up. You have tag teams that they might have had some type of a spat there finally, and now they're into, oh, you suck, and oh yeah, we're no longer tag teams. Yeah. We have other people where you might have been attacking one person after match. I run in and all of a sudden, Scary got off with the chair or something like that, and now I unite with Omar here, and now we want to take on you and somebody else, so we're getting it's a tag team match. So you got professional wrestling is that product that there's something in it for everyone. Whether you like watching midgets or women's or tag teams or singles or whatever it be, but you've seen it all when it comes
Speaking of timing in that era, Jim Cornette speaks highly of you. How is it working with Jim?
Jim Cornette, a complete professional, but he's very passionate about the product.
Yeah.
I mean, when Jim Cornette starts talking professional wrestling, you can start to see the child that fell in love with it so many decades ago. He's very passionate about the sport. He wants to make sense out of the sport, and there's a lot of people that were never professional wrestlers, but somehow they're on the creative team now.
Yes, and this is what we're suffering these days with the WWE, in my opinion. I mean, I got my son grew up on it, and now he looks at me, he's like, he literally, I said with my son, 17 years old now, and I'm like, oh my God, this reminds me of the WWE Federation, World Wrestling Federation time when it got corny with the Papa Shangos and all that. I'm sitting here, I was like, hey, you want to watch my No, Dad. I'm like, what happened? He's like, I'll wait for Wednesday for AEW.
Yeah.
And watching AEW now, I mean, I want to get your opinion. You being part of the Attitude Era, at the beginning of the Attitude Era, you were beginning because you were brought in as like, holy cow, here comes the cage fighter. That's how they built you, the ultimate fighter, coming in, beating the hell out of the pro wrestlers that time.
Yeah, just a new twist to the same old saga.
You didn't talk. You had your wrist wrapped. That's it. You had your gray shirt and you got your sweat on.
Sweaty out to it there.
Exactly.
But other cool things.
You put your mouth guard on and you just went and beat the shit out of people.
No one else was doing that.
Nobody else was doing it at that time.
Take that water bottle, spit some water, put that mouthpiece in, and you spit that water right on out.
I remember that. And to me, being a martial artist and remembering combat sports at that time, I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Then, of course, the Ken Shamrocks came in, and then we had the Goldbergs, and we had that. But talking to you right now, when you look at the product right now, I know it's kind of different realm than when we were talking about MMA and all this. When you look at the product right now, your opinion, being involved in the is the era that changed pro wrestling, because you were part of the WWF Attitude Era. We had WCW going on with the NWO time, and it was that collision that time. And before Goldberg popped up.
Yeah. I think that it was an excellent time to be involved in professional wrestling, being on the WWF roster, because at that time, WCW was kicking Vince's butt.
Yes.
WWF's butt on a weekly rating basis. So, WWF, this Attitude Era, they were pushing the envelope. WCW had Bill Goldberg. WWF had Bob whatever.
Backlund.
No, they had the anti-tour guy had.
Yeah, they had weird guys at the time. I mean, I was like, it was a terrible time at that business.
But it was but they were pushing the envelope more and more to do a little bit more riskier type of products. So I mean, I actually enjoyed, for the most part, what I was doing. They were usually quite strong in the beginning, but then there came a point where it's like going, we got no control over this guy.
Is that what really happened with you?
Well, again, this is just me speculating.
Okay.
For example, if I got no control, you can work for anybody. What if we put a strap on you that means something in our WWE people, WWF people, and all of a sudden you work for another company and they beat you.
That's a risk.
With that strap.
Yeah.
So I think that might have been one of the things that held them back from used to be strong. This kind of going, we can't put this guy in because we got no control over him. I can work for anybody.
Well, you had a comment, two things actually. It was between the two, between MMA, UFC, and WWF, which I want to ask you about. We talked about, so let's put this in the podcast. let's stick to WWE for now, but if we go back to UFC. There was a moment in which is the Royal Rumble.
Oh, yes.
Of you walking in, and I remember seeing you. I'm like, how is this going to play out? But I heard there was speculations that time that they didn't know what you're going to do.
Well, what was happening was, okay, first off, we talked about it a little bit earlier. As a professional wrestler,
Yes.
they kind of revamp you.
Yep.
And maybe give you a new costume, give you a new storyline. So they were looking at revamping me. I was basically, as Dan said before, I was basically a no nonsense, kind of a badass type of a person, but I never cut no promos, didn't really talk or anything like that. I just basically did what I did. So now they're doing it, looking at something like repackaging me. Now they want to put 666 across the forehead. They want Mark of the Beast. They want to make me like an Undertaker disciple. So as they start pitching me these ideas...
Is that when he was going through the whole satanic vision
yes,
time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And literally as this creative team is pitching me this, I put up my hands like a T. I make the little whistle noise like, time out, guys. Not going to happen. I live in small town USA. I'm not going to have any repercussions against my family, nor against my businesses, nor against me, because before ever getting involved in professional wrestling, I went to a couple shows to watch it. I was watching the crowd more than I was watching the product. I'm watching the product that they're watching, but I'm watching the interaction. Professional wrestling does prey upon a lot of special needs organizations. That a lot of these special needs organizations, again, it's a wonderful what they do for them, but at the same token, can a lot of these special needs people, can they differentiate from what is real and what is not?
Back at that time, they didn't differentiate.
No, you're exactly right. So again,
That time, I remember it was...
Time out, not going to do this. So now I have like one of these road agents. They're like, well, Dan, we could start using you poorly. I'm like going, well, what do you mean by that? Well, we could start having you lose matches. I go, oh, really? Where does it say anywhere on my contract I have to lose to anybody? What if I walk into your magical, mystical world of fantasy and I turn fantasy into reality? Which one of your so-called stars is got to stand a chance with me? But that's good. The Royal Rumble's coming up. So now, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so this company is looking to X-Day me. So it's kind of going, now I can make a phone call over to Eric Bischoff, WCW, Ted Turner, and go, I'm about to enter this Royal Rumble. I already know that I might go out there as number whatever, 7, 8, or 9. I go out there and I'm booted back out around number 13, 14, or 15. Just if you know that when this guy goes out, I basically get the foul because it's all part of the show. I go, what's it worth to you guys, WCW, Ted Turner, Eric Bischoff? What's it worth to you guys that when it's time for me to exit the ring, I now turn fantasy
to reality.
into reality, knowing that this is live.
Yeah.
It's a live pay-per-view in an arena that people watch. People are going to be thinking it's all part of the show.
Yeah.
And I start shit-canning opponent after opponent, now waiting every 90 seconds for fresh meat to come right in. Now, eventually, just by sheer numbers, they might send 2, 3 guys at a time to get me out of the ring. So if they got me out of the ring, but have they got me out of the arena yet? No, they haven't. So I actually think that what's it worth to Ted Turner, Eric Bischoff, what's it worth to your WCW organization for me to wreak havoc into a company for one day? I easily could have made $1 million or $2 million for one night.
That time, how hungry they were and for the win that, I am pretty sure.
Well, but the sheer fact that they basically agreed to my terms, they're just going to pay me out.
So that was happening.
And I no longer had to show up for work. So it's kind of like the last few months of my career. It's kind of like going, paychecks kept coming.
I kind of wonder about
that
that because I was in Greensboro, North Carolina that time. There's a story, I don't know, I remember I shared with you on the phone, we were talking, but I'll bring this to the crowd. I was with my brother at that time, and my brother's younger than me, he's like 4 years younger than me, and he was the generation that saw that Ken Shamrock didn't see the Dan Severn as me. We were at the hotel.
I won't hold that against your brother then. Okay.
Yeah, you got that right. So he saw Ken Shamrock, got excited, and Ken just and ignored him. And I'm like, damn. I was just sitting at the bar. Here you come. And I was like, hey man, Dan is here. I'm going. He's like, he kind of stared at me like, you know. I was like, all right. And you will remember, of course, you got so fast. I go in and I drag my fat ass brother with me. Get your ass here. Let's go talk to Dan. I would never. I was like, Mr. Severn, you know, we're fans. And I don't know you were in Greensboro that time. It was the King of the Ring that time. It was a Rock and Undertaker. I don't know if you would utilize. I remember seeing you, but I wasn't that much of a time for you to give you. I think that was during the time you might be going out during that time.
All right.
Ken has his own thing going on with the whole corporation, whatever crap going on. But anyway. And I said, hey, check this out. So I would talk to you, and I was like, I bet you will talk to us. You gave us 15 minutes, man. And to me, it's like, I didn't have to ask for autograph, and my brother was looking at me, I was like, man, he's really cool. He's not the asshole I see on TV, because he was the character.
I portray a character.
But you were never talking.
Exactly.
You just came in as an assassin, annihilated everybody, and walked off. And Ken, for some reason, that time, they were billing him as...
Yes.
The Ultimate Fighter, blah, blah, blah. And I was never a fan. I'll be honest with you, I've never been a fan.
The most dangerous man in the world.
Yes, I remember that. And I was just like zero about it. And my brother was just like a fanboy running in, getting his back, and he just blew him out. And he was like, damn. I was like, I bet you Dan Severn will do that. And that was, God, I think 1999. It has to be around that time. It was Greensboro, North Carolina. I would never forget that. So that's kind of how you stand tall in front of those guys during that time.
Well, but at the same token, I'm always, when I was working for the WWF at the time, I would go out a couple hours before the show starts because in the back of the building where all the wrestlers are driving and stuff like that, they would come on in, they'd go on out, but they'd always have it barricaded off. But a lot of fans would come out there and to just beat the wrestlers. Mm-hmm. So I would go out there and I would shake hands. I would tell some stories and stuff like that. And they're like going, wow, that's so cool that you're out there. They're like going, well,
you never portrayed your character outside during that time.
No,
so that was different.
No. So, but they're meeting Dan Severn, the real person.
Yes.
And they're like, well, that's so cool that you do it. Well, why doesn't, they're asking, well, why doesn't some of the other people go? I go, I can't speak for them.
Okay.
And they're like, well, but then I go, why are you doing it? I go, well, who pays my bills? Or they're like, Vince McMahon. I go, really? I go, who pays my bills? If you guys didn't show up here today to buy a ticket or something like that, so ultimately I go, you guys are paying my salary for what I received here. So I appreciate that. So I'm out here thanking you by interacting with you, talking to you, answering some questions. And they thought, that's so cool. But then they would say, can you go get so-and-so or this? I go, no. I go, I'm no messenger boy for nobody else. I go, if they want to come out and speak, that's on them.
Yeah.
I go, I understand what this industry is all about.
Yeah.
And I want to know that there's two parts of Dan Severn. Yeah, sure, there's always going to be Dan Severn, the serious competitor, but there's going to be the laid-back Dan Severn that you're going to meet, you know, that is not going to be out there putting on the showmanship type aspect.
No, that makes sense.
And even
we got to wrap things because we got to keep it under 2 hours.
Yeah.
So what are you doing nowadays anyway?
I still do a lot of the same thing. I still travel all around the country doing seminars, doing clinics. This is what I like to do. My first love is teaching amateur wrestling, whether it's on a junior high level, high school level, collegiate level, but then I'm also versed in freestyle wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling. I'm also involved into law enforcement, corrections, air marshal, border patrol, military. I have an actual certified ground combatants program, but then I teach mixed martial arts. I teach submission grappling. I teach gi, non-gi applications. I've done, cell extractions. These things that tours I go, I've never been any of them. Most of the people I've never been. I've not worked in corrections. I've not done this or that. But it's kind of going. But show me. I've had a lot of people that are about this industry, and they will simply bring me in because they look at me as a subject expert. I go, put me in the uniform, put me in the gear, so I understand a little bit more. Like military, I have never been in the military, but they love some stuff I come up. By the time I put the rucksack on, I got the weapon strap. I'm very creative as to teach things from being in the gear and trying to move around what limitations I may have.
That makes sense. So what about toxic masculinity?
Well, I mean, that's just a podcast that Don Fry and I.
How much hate do you guys get on that name? I'm just curious.
You know, it was Don that came up with the name Toxic Masculinity. I'm kind of like Don's whooping boy on the show because if I always tell people that if you ever watch the movie Grumpier Old Men,
Yes.
Don Fry is Walter Matthau, and I'm like the Felix Under characters because it's Don has no sensory whatsoever.
Oh, no.